Praise the Lord and welcome to our Monday evening devotion. You know, that prophecy that my grandfather spoke over us in 1991 from Ezekiel 9, because it's so central to us being in the last days of the last days, even though we said it over and over again, we need to keep reminding ourselves about it. We need to keep talking about it. My dad mentioned it again yesterday when he talked about God quietly marking heads. You know, going back to what the scriptures actually say, who were the people that were receiving that mark? It was the people who were sighing and crying over the abominations happening in God's house, and everybody else got destroyed. You know, another thing that kind of struck with me recently, we're on our way to the next sacred assembly in September. You know, going back to our last sacred assembly, the very next service that we had after that sacred assembly, my dad said that we need to have a renewed and brand new passion. And the word passion kind of struck with me when we were talking about sighing and crying. Of course, passion has to apply to prayer. Passion has to apply to worship. But what about the sighing and crying part? Is our sighing and crying silence, something that we keep to ourselves, or something that we express passion through so that we can receive that mark from God? You know, not too long ago, I was riding with my dad in his truck, and he had this tape on from one of my grandfather, Pastor Sam's messages. And in that message, he was expressing a lot of very aggressive disappointment in people who refused to put their faith in God to work. Like for example, people who were being attacked in their body by the devil, and they trusted more so in things like pills and medicine rather than the healing power of God, which of course I'm sure struck something with my grandfather so much because his ministry was about touching and healing people and things like that. Or he was expressing disappointment in people who refused to rely on God for taking care of their financial situations, their relationship situations, but he was so passionate and so aggressive about his disappointment in those things that screamed sighing and crying to me, because it's true. If you want to be a part of God's remnant and you're not putting your faith to work, you refuse to show God that you actually trust him in situations like that, that is an abomination before the Lord. That absolutely is an abomination. And my grandfather expressing disappointment in that absolutely just screams sighing and crying to me. Yes, of course, this is not a message about putting your faith to work. You need to be putting your faith to work, absolutely. But passion absolutely needs to be in prayer, absolutely needs to be in worship, but it absolutely needs to be in your sighing and crying. We need to be reminding ourselves of that, because we need to not only assure that we ourselves receive that mark, but we need to be talking to each other about how we recognize that these things that the people within the dead church are doing right now, there's a reason that they're not a part of the remnant. Those are reasons to sigh and cry and show passion. There needs to be passion in everything that we do as we continue to climb the mountain, as we are in this prophecy of the last days of the last days. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow.